BeeBusinessBee 2016 Research Theme, Technological Change, E-commerce. This video is going to look at the 2016 AQA Research Theme, taking each bullet point and giving you some prompts and some guidance. It's not meant to be a full detailed video that does all the answers for you. You're going to have to carry out some of your own research. However, hopefully it'll get you thinking about some of the concepts and the key knowledge that you might want to use. Let's start by looking at the brief that you've been given. You've been asked to carry out some research into the impact that e-commerce has on a competitive environment within industries, the impact of e-commerce on businesses and their functional areas, the impact of e-commerce on different stakeholder groups, the extent to which e-commerce creates opportunities and poses threats for business, the factors influencing if and why and also how businesses respond to the growth of e-commerce, the impact of e-commerce on businesses' performance and on strategy, both nationally and internationally. And all of these should have obviously some evidence that you can use in section A of your answer. Of course, you need to understand the knowledge that goes into it, and you should be able to find the links. The links should be easy once you understand the concepts. Firstly, I want to start by making sure you understand what e-commerce is. Now, there's lots of definitions out there for e-commerce, but one of the ones that I liked and I thought I'd use in this video is e-commerce are commercial transactions that are conducted electronically. So it's some form of commercial transaction that takes place electronically. That leads me to this term, and this is what I covered when I did my degree, as I'm a specialist actually in this area of business, believe it or not, e-procurement. Now, we all think of e-commerce being probably the front end that you see when you go online and you buy through Amazon or you buy off eBay, through the online auctions, but actually e-procurement is what it says it is. It's literally, procurement means purchasing. So this is a term that's used when it comes to purchasing products or services online. Now, we as retailers procure, so at the front end, but also companies will procure using their own systems to try and get discount. So as well as what you might want to think about like the tertiary procurement process in e-commerce, there's also secondary that takes place where it's happening between manufacturers to get discount as well. And it goes back to a lot of levels. Don't just see it as being a one thing that the consumer benefits from. Everybody can benefit from e-commerce, and we'll look into more detail about that. Okay, let's start looking at the impact of e-commerce. Now, the best way that we can assess the impact is using Michael Porter's 5 forces model. Now, this is a great model to know and learn, and I would really advise you use this in your answers if you get a chance to do it. So try and jot it down and try and link it and use it in your answers. It effectively is looking at how competitive a market is. And Porter's 5 forces is a great model to do exactly that. I'm going to take you through in stage and look at what e-commerce has done exactly. So first, let's start by looking at the threat of new entrants. So what has e-commerce done? Well, it's created the threat of increased new entrants in the marketplace because you've got reduced barriers to entry. It's fairly easy and fairly cheap for people to set up their own website these days, to sell online, to compete. Gone are the days where you used to pay £10,000 for a website designed. You can now pay something like £700 for the exact same website that you previously were paying all that money out there for. Everybody is trained at school these days in ICT and computing to be able to create some form of website. Those skills are no longer specialist. So like I say, it's fairly cheap to get yourself online. You can spend about £40 to get yourself a website online. If you want to think about examples of this, look at the insurance market. You've got an example like Confused.com, Compare the Market, Go Compare, even AutoNet Insurance, who are a smaller player, but proving exactly that. You can start competing in the market quite easily. They're all websites who effectively let you obtain a price from other established insurers. Some insurers like Direct Line refuse to partake in this because they don't want to get involved in a price battle. That's part of their strategy that happens, and you will have noticed that in their adverts. They say you have to go direct to them. They want to build that relationship themselves. However, you've got so many of these websites out there which are all able to just set up, compete straight away, that you can sell to anybody quite easily. Think about it, there are no barriers really to entry. Okay, let's take a look at the power that suppliers have got. And what you tend to see because of e-commerce, you tend to have a reduced level of power that suppliers have got. And that tends to be because the internet allows a globalized marketplace. And with the globalised marketplace, people have got more choice. They tend to be able to look at price, become more price conscious, and they get a greater chance to negotiate discounts, which of course actually reduces your customer loyalty level, and it's a more price focused strategy. That's one of the real challenges for businesses at the moment, that a lot of people are developing their marketing strategy to try and develop that loyalty, because they know that they might be beaten on price. Somebody will always offer a lower price to try and obtain that market share and that growth. If you want to look at an example of how this is working effectively in theory, the UK government has got its own tendering website now, where effectively it's asking anybody to tender for contracts. You may see it in your local council, they all do it. They actually advertise openly for people to tender and bid for projects. Again, looking to drive down the price. Other great examples, more you're probably well aware of, is Made in China, Alibaba. Exactly the same idea. If you go on those websites, you've got people bidding in theory to take on your project and your work. And of course, it's all down to effectively who can do it for the lowest unit cost, which the idea hopefully is that you can increase profit margins. And that's one of the big cultural shifts that you start to see with consumer habits and even company habits, that establishing those loyalty levels is quite tricky these days, and you've got to spend a great deal of money and start to think strategically, how can we build up that customer loyalty? Okay, what about the power of the customer? Well, the problem here is you've got increased customer power. E-commerce means that the customer can go wherever they like, choose to buy from whoever they want to buy from, and as a result of that, it means that they've got more suppliers to pick from. The customer themselves have got the ability to drive down the price and dictate really what service agreements they want. I'm sure you've all been there when you sent an email to a supplier that you want to deal with saying, well, I can get it cheaper online. And a lot of companies feel the pressure to obviously try and match that price. The good example of that is John Lewis, who say they're never knowingly undersold. So they will try and match any price and obviously also offer a higher customer service. But they're hoping that customers will come back to them because they're trying to establish that customer loyalty. But again, it's proving tricky. I mean, the best examples of this are, look at Google Shopping, Amazon, or any price comparison website. The websites are now, and the internet in general, is designed to enable you to compete and try and drive down the price of what you're willing to pay. And if you notice, a lot of customers are now aware, and the main priority when they shop online is to get the price down. And that's the same in the commercial industry as well, as we talked about with procurement before. Then, of course, you've got this threat of substitutes. Now, substitutes are rival products. If you want to think about this here, you've got an increased threat from substitute products. You've got more substitutes because, again, the internet opens up that global marketplace. Typically, what you're now finding, as we said before, is price conscious. People are competing on price. They know that somebody will offer that service that somebody else is doing, probably at a lower unit cost. Of course, from a business point of view, you've got the ability now to outsource real specialist activities anywhere in the world. What previously used to only be able to be done maybe down the road can now be done anywhere in the world. So where you used to be held to ransom because you had to pay that price to get the job done, now you know you can look elsewhere and you can get the item anywhere you like. A cracking example of this, if you want to think about this, is car dealers. Now, websites now like Drive the Deal, Car Wow, which are effectively brokers, middlemen, who are now allowing the customer, so rather than feeling like you've got to buy your car from your local dealer, where that was typically what you wanted to do. If you wanted to buy a car, you had to go to your dealer, in theory, unless you wanted to drive miles to pick up a car. Now, these websites are basically putting you in touch with dealers from anywhere in the UK, who can all compete on price, and they're offering to deliver the car to you. Which, of course, means that dealerships locally are having to start to think about how do they build that relationship. Can they ask for the higher margins they used to have, or they've got to lower the margins they're actually offering and trying to build up more customer relationship so the customer actually comes back to them and chooses them for the service they offer rather than just purely on the price. Other examples are Google. Believe it or not, you can now get lawyers online. You can even get your legal services paid for online. There's also a Crunch, who are an accounting company who do exactly the same. As I mentioned, you've got CarWow and Drive the Deal who do all that. You can see that substitute products are a real problem. Using all of those, you can assess how competitive the market is, and as a result of e-commerce, what you tend to find is we've now got increased competitive rivalry in most markets. You tend to find now that suppliers have got reduced power, probably not much power at all. You tend to find that the customer now has got massively increased customer power because they can go to anywhere they want to. You're now going to find that your specialist services, which you thought nobody could even get into that marketplace, are now under threat. Think about your legal services and your accountancy. Where you used to use your local accountant, you can now do it all online. There are software systems out there that allow it to all be done online. The only way really is that you need to look at protectionism. So patents, trademarks, they could increase potentially your supplier power and the power you've got to drive up the price. However, you've also got to think about those protectionism laws don't always work. With the globalization you've got, people are always willing to clone and copy, and you're relying on the Berne Convention effectively to prevent others from copying your work. And the Berne Convention is not accepted in every single country in the world. I mean, Apple, for example, is a great example of issuing their power. They force newspaper publishers effectively to use their subscription method rather than what they had in their own apps. Apple was taking a cut of the money. So the newspapers were not happy about this. They were losing money. And as a result of this, some of them actually refused to sell their newspaper publications through the Apple front end that they were trying to force to. I think it's called Newsstand. And as a result of that, obviously that's why you've got different apps out there now. And that's just supply power. If you want to be on the Apple marketplace, you've got to follow their rules. And you could say that's protectionism working perfectly. So if you close your market down and you can only get it from there, you're going to pay for it. And it does, so it does still work. And you can protect your marketplace. Okay, let's try and look at the impact of e-commerce on the different functional areas. Now, clearly, I can only pick some of the functionalities of this video because I could go forever. But I'm going to try and go through a few functional areas to give you some examples. So let's look at marketing. Well, the impacts on functional areas for marketing typically is that you can now outsource your marketing to typically specialists. There are lots of marketing companies out there who will do the work for you. Again, compete on price, so you can drive the price down and you can probably get a better service. You don't need to employ somebody in your own workplace, which you can reduce your costs. And you can obviously tap into their skills. Typically, you can start to achieve marketing economies of scale. You're starting to take advantage of those technical skills that exist. However, you've got to bear in mind that just because you're outsourcing, in the long run, it could be more expensive. Because you're starting to pay for technical skills and expertise. As a result of that, you may have to pay more money than what you could use somebody in your own workplace to do. You could also argue that you're going to lose control of your marketing. You might end up with standardization, so you see that same sort of poster being used elsewhere because marketing companies might use it somewhere else. And as a result of that, you could lose your competitive advantage. So you've got to bear in mind that, just outsourcing marketing, yes, there are benefits that come with outsourcing marketing, but there's also massive drawbacks. The same for finance. If you outsource your finance, typically you can achieve a financial economy of scale. You are hopefully going to tap into specialists. You would hope that, in theory, some of this e-commerce can mean that you've got better software packages and now better collaboration between your cost and your profit centers. You can make back payments. So that means that typically you're going to pay less bank charges, things are cheaper, quicker, taking place all the time. Again, you're going to take advantage of those technical skills that exist. However, you've got to factor in again, is it getting more expensive to buy in some large accounting company? Also, how much knowledge has that accounting company got of your specific organisation? Do they know what your organisation actually does? Do they know all the technical jargon, all the little processes, all the deductions that you might go on, all the simple little tasks that take place which may actually affect how your organisation runs? They could make potential cost-saving recommendations looking at data, but do they actually know the organisation that well? Could it cause conflict in the workplace? Could it cause issues in the long run? All factors that you've got to think about, the impact on the company's culture overall. Distribution. Well, typically e-commerce has made most people look at distribution, and it's in the news recently at the moment because you've got Sainsbury's looking to try and buy Homebase purely for their distribution network because they want to get their hands on Argos's distribution because obviously Homebase own, if you didn't know that. You tend to see just-in-time processes have all been adapted. You tend to get closer links now with your suppliers and your customers due to online selling. Effectively, these links are now established for legit. As a result of that, you tend to get quicker response times. So you're getting a quicker response time from your supplier. You're holding less stock. You become more efficient in how you operate. You can argue that it improves customer service because customers can now track orders, see where things are in the supply system and the supply chain, and that's obviously really important. However, you've got to then consider the initial investment can be really expensive in this sort of system. You've got to think about how that does impact on your employees because employees may fear for their job. So then you've got job security and job satisfaction, and again, think about the knock-on effect. You can invest in technology, but what is the impact on employees? And of course, then you start getting increased pressure on your performance. Think about if the customer can actually track the process and they know exactly where everything is in the stage of the process, the customer is expecting delivery. The company now has to deliver by those set time frames and deadlines because the customer is now coming to expect it. Let's look at the impact on the human resource area of business. So it's typically going to have a mixed impact on human resources. You could say that it's going to improve the working environment because e-commerce typically means that you're getting away from any form of manual labour, getting into automation systems and processes. A lot of it's barcoded and tagged so that it can all be picked and packed really easily. Look at the Amazon warehouses, do some research on that process there. You could argue that it makes the recruitment of staff potentially easier and cheaper because you can start to have employment agencies who are tendering for your work and to fill your gaps in your workforce, and obviously that's going to drive down the price and the cost. Of course, the impact that could be on how skilled are going to be the people that actually are going to fill them roles. But at the same time, it's still an e-commerce process. You're still tendering to work for a big organisation, and it might make it easier with an agency to obviously work and build that relationship and hopefully get better quality of staff that are brought in. Of course, you've got to consider the impact which it can have on morale of the employees who are in the business. I mean, if you work in a shop, then you may start to consider, is your job safe? Is the business going to start to look to move to warehousing and packaging and the distribution side, the online part of the business? Of course, could your job be replaced by some automatic process which just takes the customer's order and processes the whole system? So, employees' motivation and morale could be a concern. Again, that might create uncertainty, and if it creates uncertainty, it creates inefficiency really, and creates damage to the workplace and the morale and the overall culture. And then you've got to think about what skills have you got in your workforce. Have your existing employees got the skills to be able to adapt to these new changes that are being brought about? Can you take your retail staff and retrain them and reuse them in the organisation? Do you need to make them redundant, which of course is going to cost you money financially? So there's lots of considerations that you need to think about on the human resource side of e-commerce. Then you've got your administration side. Your administration side, you could argue it tends to speed up the process e-commerce does, because you tend to find that you can tender for different parts of your administration business. So like your pens, your paper, all of your stationery, you can tender for it and place it at a tender, hopefully get the lowest price and drive down the cost per unit of your administration cost centre. Of course, you can centralise your administration. So e-commerce, obviously, by doing all this, means you can centralise. You can purchase in bulk, so you get the economy of scale discount. You can try and bring together all your administration centrally because a lot of it's done electronically, so it doesn't matter where the customer's buying from, it can all come into a same head office which can then produce all the administration documentation and share out with the organisation. And you tend to find you've got reduced wastage and reduced costs. You're more environmentally friendly because obviously a lot of it is actually going to be less paperwork and more electronic documentation. Of course, then you've got to consider what's the impact going to be and on the morale of your employees. How do your office staff feel when they start to see that their roles are being taken away and being centralised in the organisation? When they find that they sense that they're no longer required in the organisation, or their role is changing, and again that can have an impact on the efficiency of the organisation and the motivation of the organisation, and again the cost of redundancy. And of course, you might have potential issues if you've got different locations and cultures and tax based. So think about your tax rates that you pay in different countries. Some countries pay VAT at a different rate because it depends on whether it's imported or exported. So obviously it's meant to be a standard figure, but of course it all depends on imports and exports. So different taxations, different rules based on different products that are sold. How do you overcome that based on the customer's location? That can cause more complex areas of administration being considered and obviously combined with your legal aspects of business. And then you've got your operations. Now, obviously, operations, clearly, the main impact you'll see is just-in-time JIT processes being adopted. And that's mainly going to be because the way it works with ordering electronically is you don't want to hold much stock. So that's one of the benefits. You're going to hold less stock. So that means you're not going to see the same sort of depreciation, hopefully, in your stock. You're going to have the same amount of cash tied up in cash flow. So you're going to have a more positive cash flow for your business. You should hopefully see that you're going to see increased precedence of orders. So as a result of that, you should see more automation taking place, and the customer very much can track and monitor and see the whole process of the system, which means that you can actually, as an organisation and employees, can be tracked and monitored closely and see what they're up to as well at every single stage, and you can use more time and motion to see where they're up to. Of course, then you've got to think about how does that impact on motivation? How do employees feel about being tracked and being monitored at every single stage and being told to operate at a faster pace for different roles in the job? Also, you've got the increased pressure on meeting the customer expectation. Because the customer can start to see every single stage in the process, you've got to think about the customer can literally start to track where that parcel is or where that product is within the products and supply line. As a result of that, they get their own expectations, and you need to manage those expectations. And if you start guaranteeing delivery 24 hours or the same day delivery, then the customer expects it, and of course that puts more pressure on the employees. Typically all of this is going to be capital intensive. You need to buy in high-end production equipment, high-end machinery to make this happen. Barcoding, tagging, scanning, all these RFID chips, all this stuff is all being used all the time and integrated in the systems. These systems don't come cheap, and they need constant updating and upgrading, because of course your rivals are constantly spending money on new systems and new techniques. And that just gives you an idea of some of the functional areas. You may want to go and do some research at other ones, but I'm just going to try and prompt you some thoughts there. And clearly you want to try and find examples of some of these. Do a little bit of searching around on the internet. You can easily find them. Stakeholders. These are individuals or groups who have an interest in how an organisation operates. Now what we can consider here is, how do stakeholders feel about e-commerce? And this is where we have to start to think about this and break it down by typical interest. So let's start with the shareholders. Typically interest that they're going to have, they want to see increased sales. They want to see reduced costs. They want to see increased profits, and because they're going to increase profits, they're going to get an increase in the dividend and more return. However, are they going to be happy about the short-term spending on some of the fancy systems that need to be purchased to make e-commerce effective in an organisation? That's going to lower their dividend in the first year. However, you could argue that it's going to lower unit cost in the long term, and as a result of that, it should increase profits and increase their dividend. So this depends on whether it's a short-term or long-term approach that the shareholders taking. You would also hope that as a result of technological investment, they're going to see the unit cost fall because of increased efficiency. Increased efficiency again should increase profits, and as a result, you're hopefully going to see an increase in your dividend. It could potentially open up new markets, which again could increase sales for the organisation. However, they could be concerned because it could also see an increase in competition for them. So you've got to consider how the shareholders are going to feel about that. You know, potential on one hand of a real opportunity, but there's also a threat there. So you've got to weigh that up and think about what a shareholder's going to think about that. And of course, some shareholders are going to have real concerns over this reduced barriers to entry. If our organisation can enter the market, who else come in there? How is the organisation actually protecting itself from these potential risks that exist in the market? Customers, they're a stakeholder. Now, what do customers typically want to see? They want to see cheaper prices, they want to see more competition, they want to see more choice, and effectively they want products and services that meet their needs. What's the impact of e-commerce? Well, you're going to see increased levels of competition. So customers are going to be fairly happy about that, because they're going to see more competition, they've got more choice. As a result of that, it's more competitive pricing. And let's be honest, customers are becoming more price focused and price conscious. They're going to like the fact that they can start to play off suppliers against each other. As a result of that, you'd hope that it's going to see an increased ability to meet their individual needs, so they can start to personalise what they want, they can see the delivery times come down, they can start to hopefully get free delivery because they'll find that there's competition in the marketplace. So customers are tending to be happy about this. It's more convenient as a result of e-commerce, and as you can see, that's tending to meet the customer's needs. What about employees? Well, employees typically tend to look after themselves. They want to see job security. They probably want employee working conditions, and they're probably looking to increase their pay in the long term. How do they feel about e-commerce? Depends on probably where you work. If you work in the retail outlet in a shop, you're probably concerned about it. You probably feel less job security because you're seeing organisations like, take your retailers like John Lewis, like your Marks & Spencer's, investing more and more money in the online distribution side rather than the retail outlets. Again, if you want to look at like the home-based story I was saying before, look at the stores. They're on about, if it was actually to be purchased by Sainsbury's, the first thing they would do is shut up some of the stores. So some of the Argos stores would be shut up, they'd be placed into the Sainsbury's stores. But of course, at the same time, they would invest in their supply chain for their e-commerce. So you've got reduced job security in some aspects because they also fear that they could lose a job. And then some of them will also fear they could lose a job because of technological replacement, because technological advancements mean that actually some of those jobs no longer need to be done by a human because it can all be self and automated and processed through, like the Amazon and warehouses that you see popping up all over the UK. They don't actually employ that many people if you look at how they work. Improved working conditions in some aspects, typically, because e-commerce and technology does tend to improve your working conditions. However, you could also argue that it places more increased demands on work-life balance. With e-commerce means that customers can shop 24/7. As a result of that, there's probably an expectation that orders are processed for longer. Look at the new competitive marketplace that's happening. Companies are now starting to compete on who can deliver the same day. Like you've got Argos same day delivery, you've got Amazon with their Prime same day. So there's more pressure being placed on all the time, and smaller companies will start feeling the pressure to try and meet those same deadlines. And of course, in theory, you could argue there's a reduction in the real term specialist pay, because you can no longer get the same level of pay that you used to get from a specialist skill, because again, increased competition, reduced barriers to entry. Suppliers. How do your suppliers feel about this? Well, this is an interesting one when you want to think about this one. Suppliers tend to want to increase their profit margins. They want to build stronger customer relationships. Now, to increase profit margins typically means they need to increase the price. Impact of e-commerce? Well, that's going to clash straight away. E-commerce, as we've already established, tends to drive down profit margins, and it increases the competitiveness in the marketplace. So as a result of that, they're not going to be happy about that. Those reduced barriers to entry mean that typically suppliers are not going to like e-commerce. It's going to be difficult for them to build up lasting relationships with suppliers. They've got to think differently. They've got to work probably close with their marketing functional area. They've got to work well close with their HR functional area to try and establish those relationships they build up with customers. So from a supplier point of view, it makes it more difficult to compete. But then if you want to look cynically at this, for all those negatives, there's also their potential opportunities. Again, opportunities and threats. Suppliers have got an increased ability now to tap into new markets. They can diversify quicker. They can compete on price if they wish to and try and establish and grow their organisation quicker. So again, for every threat there are also potential opportunities. I want to just look at an example here. So again, as I've encouraged you throughout this video, I think you need to look at your own examples. But a good one is Amazon and Royal Mail. And this just shows you a link and the relationship between stakeholders. I mean, Amazon previously had a good relationship with their delivery partner, who obviously a stakeholder, Royal Mail. The partnership was critical to the success of Amazon, and as a poor service from Amazon supplier could obviously damage the experience that customers would get overall, and clearly that would damage the brand and the profitability of Amazon as an organisation. So, in 2009, Royal Mail started to suffer from strikes, and that obviously started to have an impact on the Amazon deliveries. Of course, these strikes were designed to do exactly that. And as a result of that, it was happening at the Christmas period, which of course is critical for Amazon, who guaranteed delivery. At the time, they had an exclusive contract with Royal Mail worth £25 million, and they were actually the second largest customer to Royal Mail, so quite a big customer. Now, Amazon obviously was getting worried by what was happening, and clearly the damage that was happening to their brand and the media attention that was being caused. So Amazon agreed effectively a new parcel deal with the home delivery network to deliver their parcels. And that had a massive implication and impact on Royal Mail. Now that just shows you there about the reduced barriers to entry, about protection. Royal Mail had a contract there. Royal Mail were in there. Royal Mail, you could argue, had a great relationship, but because they couldn't fulfil the delivery and there was so few barriers to entry, Amazon just went to another supplier. It was quite happy to compete, and it was rumoured to offer a lower price. So that just shows you the impact they have on the relationship and why it's important to build those relationships with your suppliers. Opportunities and threats. This typically can be done by using the SWOT model, and I typically advise you do this alongside the Porter's 540 and think about the logic here. Okay, let's start with the opportunities. Well, you've got obviously global markets, access to global markets, increased competition. You've now got reduced barriers to entry. It's easy to get into markets because of the advancements in technology. You can take advantage of these technical economies of scale we looked at already in your different functional areas. You've got the ability to grow your business in niche markets. So potentially, where it used to be a very small control market, you can actually widen it up and you can take advantage of other niches in other areas. So if you were a niche player in the UK, you can become a niche player in Germany and a niche player in Spain. And that's one of the advantages of globalisation. And potentially, you could build up better and closer customer relationships. You do it properly. Some companies have used e-commerce as a great way to build up relationships. Amazon do it all the time. So consider that e-commerce can build relationships if done effectively, and it's not purely about price. It could be about the lead time, supply chain, closer linked and integration. However, obviously there's some threats, and let's be honest, increased competition going to drive down price. As you said already, it's difficult to protect your ideas and your market share. You've got the threat of constant technological developments and technological change, and as a result of that, it's expensive to keep adapting. Look at TalkTalk, for example. You've got security threats you've got to consider all the time. How do you keep customers' data secure? You've got the legal requirements to go alongside that with the Data Protection Act. You've got your levels of increased competition and the power of the customer. And of course, potentially, your human resource issues. How are you going to manage that cultural change? How do your employees feel about e-commerce and the impact it's having on the business overall? So why do organisations choose e-commerce? Well, there's many factors really that influence the decision and why an organisation might consider e-commerce, and it tends to be when a business wants to respond to the opportunity or the threat that e-commerce poses. Most companies see that market growth as an opportunity, also a potential threat, because think about it, if you don't try and grow your own business, somebody else can easily compete in your marketplace. Think of people like Amazon, who are now an American organisation that started to compete in the UK. As a result of that, people like Argos had to respond. That's why they went to the same day delivery. It was a clear response to ensure that they were not going to lose market share. Consumer trends. You're seeing consumers shop online, and that started to increase. As a result, that's why most shops have started to offer online sales. There were plenty of retailers out there that actually initially were not planning on selling online. Yet they've made that move to online selling. Aldi being a classic example. Aldi made it clear they didn't want to sell online originally. Morrison's had no interest in selling online. As a result of that, both those organisations are now looking, and Morrison's does sell online already. Might be the performance of your domestic market. If your domestic market is in decline, you might try and look for alternative markets that are in growth to try and increase sales. Again, that's one of the reasons why brands are trying to develop and increase their brand presence. You could actually find that government grants are pushing e-commerce. There is money available in the UK, and part of the government grants, part of European grants exist that are pushing organisations, typically smaller ones, but they're trying to push them into e-commerce and into new markets to try and develop their business. Your competitors, as you mentioned before, that's probably linked to market growth. Their growth could force you to look to new strategies. If they start to develop and take over your core market, you might look to new niches to tap into. Media pressure and the way that the media tries to push online sales may force you to consider using e-commerce as a method, because the media can influence consumer trends that exist out there. Like I said before, the decline of your core market. If your core market is declining, you might try and look at new strategies. And it could simply be the pressure placed on you by shareholders. Shareholders placing pressure on the organisation to increase its profits and try and grow. And of course, all this is happening at the same time when the market is becoming more competitive. So, I want to try and look at some examples now of organisations. So, you've got a few examples in your head. Obviously, you've got to do your own research. This video is just purely to give you some prompts and the knowledge and try and get you thinking about this topic. So, Argos. Argos chose e-commerce. They actually had an eBay shop. Seems strange to think about it. They've gone for a rival product. eBay is a potential rival to Argos. However, they decided that it was probably one of their better strategies. There was a threat being posed because the high street footfall was falling. Consumers tended to be buying online and looking to buy on auction sites like eBay, again, price conscious. As a result of that, the UK economic position at the time when we were in recession was making customers even more concerned about the price they're paying. And as a result of that, it meant that Argos tried to look for new methods. It also is an interesting strategy if you think about it, because it gives Argos an outlet to sell their return goods. So as well as selling new items, Argos also sell items that are being returned from a customer. Or you could argue second-hand goods or faulty goods that are being repaired. This obviously gives them an ability to make some margin back on those items rather than obviously selling them on to a wholesaler who then might sell them on again. So they're getting retail price rather than wholesale price. As a result of that, Argos decided to establish a partnership with eBay, allowing the parcels to be collected in store when you buy off any eBay seller. But as a result of that, if you think about it, it was also enabling people to come in store and obviously hopefully look to the catalogue and make increased purchases. So it's a strategy that was hopefully designed to work. As a result of that, Argos has now started to look at the same day delivery, which of course has been brought about because Amazon has started to look at that, and they fear that that could be a threat to their product. So you see about the same delivery, Amazon Prime delivery, so there's a real move to try and follow their rival. And you could argue that the strength of the Argos delivery network is one of the reasons why Sainsbury's has actually tried to purchase Argos, purely because they know that Argos have got that in place, effective, and obviously it can develop the Sainsbury's brand without damaging it. Tesco with their click and collect, exactly the same model. Tesco designed this service to compete with online retailers. They worked out that customers actually didn't like the wait when they purchased online, so part of Tesco's strategy was to allow the customer to purchase online and without paying any delivery fee, come in store to collect. Now the idea here was that it meant that the customer could actually come into store, pick up the items they ordered online, and it combined what they call bricks and clicks. It meant that you could pick up your orders from online, but when you're in the store, hopefully you'll browse around and make more purchases. And that's called upselling. And within Tesco and in a competitive marketplace like retail, the idea was that when customers came in to make those purchases, they'd buy more items, and obviously you're trying to get some loyalty out of the customer for the brand. Of course, this was all free originally. Now there's a massive change in strategy. Tesco are going to start charging £2 for delivery for orders under £30. That's a massive change. Think about this from the customer point of view. Now you're being asked to pay to pick up your own delivery. Will customers choose it, or will they just choose to use things like Amazon Prime where they can actually buy it free of charge? You've got the increased pressure of demand and the fulfillment of orders, because now it's got to be in the time you say it's going to be in there, because customers are going to expect it. And you've got to ask, there are going to be question marks over potential success of this strategy. Will it work? It's debatable. John Lewis are looking at exactly the same model, and analysts out there do suggest that one of the successes of bricks and clicks is when customers can come in store and pick up orders for free, and then they can do the upselling that way. If they're going to pay for it, most customers may choose to have it delivered to their home, and you don't get that chance of upselling. The Ford Motor Company. Another example that we could look at is the Ford Motor Company. Now they are in the secondary sector because they're a manufacturing company. Now typically they spend £15.5 billion on non-production goods and services each year, and they have looked to use e-procurement as one of the methods to try and get purchasing economies of scale. And they've got about this because they're trying to order in bulk, and obviously they've got more competition, more tendering that's taking place. They've also used e-procurement as a method to try and get administration economies of scale, because they've allowed basically outsourcing of some of their admin roles, and they've also been able to combine admin from different parts of the organisation. So organisations that are based in different areas of the world can now directly input data into their partners, and obviously their partners then pull together, like for example their accounts, their administration needs. So they've been able to procure in different areas of their business and obviously reduce their overall costs. As a result of this, they're expected to see 30% reduction in costs. And of course, in a highly competitive industry, being able to reduce your cost by 30% has a massive impact, because clearly it's going to increase your profit margin. Of course, there's been a knock-on effect to this, and as a result of this, obviously they've seen 30,000 employees obviously made redundant over time globally, and some of this is actually blamed on their move to look towards e-commerce and e-procurement. Of course, on the other side of this, Ford Motor Company as a retail organisation have been able to open up new markets of retail. They've got websites now to sell cars direct and build that relationship with the customer, and they've been able to use it for better CRM, customer relationship marketing. And of course that is being used to try and develop brand loyalty and brand awareness for Ford. And of course as a result of that, it's actually been able to develop their fleet sales business, because they've been able to sell online to larger fleet providers. So as you see, it's still got retail links, but it's got manufacturing links as well, and they're using e-procurement and e-commerce to obviously purchase and tender for products and services that they sell within their business. Another organisation that's been in the news recently is Aldi. And Aldi are having a complete change of strategy as such, because they're going to branch out into online selling, and this is something that they haven't done as an organisation before. Now they're planning on selling wines and special buy items to start with. Now it's believed that this is just putting a toe in the water approach to try and potentially ensure that the supply chain is correct and try and avoid any potential issues or damage that could come about to the brand if it goes wrong. Good example of this obviously was Morrison's, who obviously had issues with their e-commerce when it first started, and to some extent many other providers have had similar issues. But of course Aldi are in a highly competitive marketplace and can't afford to make any mistakes. Again, this strategy is interesting because previously they've used special buys as a marketing tactic to attract customers to the store and then do the upselling, selling of their items, trying to get the customer away from their brand loyalty they show to Tesco, Morrison's, Sainsbury's or Asda. So you can see that this is a complete change of strategy for Aldi. They're now trying to branch out into online selling, and for a discount retailer they're moving more into the mainstream approach of retailing, going away from their diversified route that they took into the market. Could be an interesting strategy that we could watch and play out. So what's the impact on strategy? Well, nationally you can say that Argos have used e-commerce as a way to try and do same day delivery. They've used that approach that you can now look in a catalogue, or look online, depends on, it doesn't matter whether you've got a computer or not, they are enabling you to have that ability to actually get same day delivery, that same response. Clearly it's a response to the pressure from online competition like Amazon. It's a way of trying to develop more customer awareness and brand loyalty to their products and their services. John Lewis, they've got their strategy and their strapline never knowingly undersold, which really effectively means they'll price match. And of course they've done that to respond to the competition on price from online competitors, and typically it's national competitors that they're looking at. It's like your Amazons, like your Argoses, like your Tesco's. They are looking at what they do on the market and they're saying that we won't be undersold. We offer more than just that, and hopefully you choose the brand because you trust them. And they're using their marketing as a way to differentiate and add value. Exactly the same with the customer service that John Lewis provides. They're trying to differentiate, add that value to the brand, and hopefully the customer will come back. They want you to purchase from John Lewis not because of the price, but because of what the brand values are. I mean, you could look at the other side. You've got BBC Three, which of course potentially some people are arguing is even a move to e-commerce. So the strategy of taking the channel online is a cost-saving one from a business point of view because of the pressures on the BBC budgetary-wise, but it's claimed that it's responding to consumer habits, and it's going to enable a potential subscription model in the future for the BBC Three. And that's an interesting move because it's completely different to what obviously the BBC has done previously. It takes a license fee and a whole model, and by moving online means that maybe they are going to start looking at this strategy of being able to bill per user or for a password or a username. It's not known yet how they're going to start to try and prevent people from watching the TV who don't pay for a TV license. And of course online and e-commerce and being able to buy in, for example, proxy servers which enable you to watch TV and from anywhere in the world, and this is how they've got to respond to it. TV companies are trying to respond to it. They are a business at the end of the day, and there are different strategies out there. Just wanted to make you aware of some of the stuff that you can find on the internet. Clearly I'm not going to do it all for you. I haven't got time to do that. This purely is a quick video to try and give you some concepts and knowledge, but I'm going to show you some of the trends that I found straight away. According to a lot of data out there, consumer shopping trends are changing. As a result, you start to see an increase in purchasing online. You also start to see that retailers are all starting to adapt to try and meet these changing habits. For example, look at Black Friday. Previously been a massive event. Asda tried to stay out of this year, hoping it would calm down, and to some extent the evidence, if you go and do some research, shows that it did calm down. However, there was still £1 million spent every 3 minutes on Black Friday online. In the UK, in non-food, in November, £1 in every £4 spent was on non-food items. So that shows you that it's growing. Given the fact that the latest stat that I saw for Tesco was £1 in every £8 spent in Tesco, that's now £1 in every £4 is spent effectively online on non-food, a quarter. So think of the impact that has on high street and the retailers on the high street. Consumers are becoming more price conscious, and as a result of that, retailers are starting to have to offer more discounts, extend the sales periods. We've seen this, and we've seen the evidence out there for this sort of information already. And of course, as you know already, Asda didn't try and participate in Black Friday because they don't believe that discounting for one day and one strategy is going to be a long-term sustainable project. Given in mind that some of the supermarkets are reporting net profit margins of only 3%, it does make you wonder whether the strategy of discounting is a long-term strategy. Of course, they're up against an extreme competition in the marketplace that they're in. I want to just look at, obviously, John Lewis, an interesting one for John Lewis and their sales performance. John Lewis reported their Christmas sales increased by 7%, and it was mainly due to online sales, wasn't down to the stores itself. 40% of all their sales were made online, and 31% of sales made via smartphone and tablet computers, which shows you about the technological change and the diversification in technology. And think of the investment that's having to go on to constantly upgrade your systems to the new levels. What we talked about before, that's one of the real risks of doing online retailing. The fact that you've got to keep spending on security and new technology all the time. Waitrose, which is part of the John Lewis Group, saw its sales in store decline by 1.4%. So if food sales actually went down by 1.4%, yet online sales increased by 8%. Look at that. Just think of that, the impact that will have on staff as well, staff morale and motivation. Because obviously strategically they may start to think about what they're going to do with their stores. Remember, the most expensive part of their business will be the stores. The rent, the overheads that have to be paid on those stores will be vast compared to online sales. So they may start to try and look at reducing their cost base, especially in that competitive retailing market. And John Lewis believes that a lot of its success is down to the investment in the new distribution and IT systems, which of course, there you can see there straight away, investment. Now as a partnership, obviously they can invest that money and they'll get it back hopefully in a later date. But of course you've got to consider how would shareholders feel about investing large sums in IT systems. But remember, that links nicely with the move that obviously Sainsbury's have got for the Homebase group, because they're looking to try and obviously effectively take over Argos because of their distribution centre, and they have already suggested about closing stores we mentioned earlier. So you can see that all this is interlinked. There's lots of stuff out there. Okay, that's it for this BUSS4 video. Thank you for joining me. As I said at the start, this is only a short video really to start getting you thinking about the concepts. I've covered some of the knowledge that's involved, and I've given you some examples. However, you need to go away and do your own research. I think the more research that you do, the more you'll understand it. Don't forget, you can obviously check out any of the videos I've got online, and I've got some that link subject knowledge in there, so you can develop subject knowledge. But I think the more you understand it, the more you watch the news, the more you'll start to understand the different concepts, and then you can see the links. And you can use these links to put into your examination answers. That, I think, is critical to the overall success. As I say to all my students, is try and enjoy what you're learning, and try and enjoy your business. Get buzzing for it, buzzing for business. Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter. It's BeeBusinessBee, so at BeeBusinessBee, shall I say, get it right. It's subscribe on YouTube. It's obviously youtube.com/BeeBusinessBee, and obviously you must be doing that while you're watching the video now. And don't forget to check out the website, BeeBusinessBee.co.uk, where you can find more resources and lots of quizzing activities to help you along the way. Remember, keep buzzing.